Our first speaker, a resident of Ottawa, is a father of two and a senior development manager with a local technology company with a team of 50. He has taken on leadership positions from an early age. By the way, you can see his family name has been as a servant, learning from each other, from being a scout troop leader to a student faculty president, from coaching Little League baseball to founding a community association to the president of an electoral district association. He has always been involved and leading in his community. He joined the Toastmasters International in 2012 and founded his own club and discovered the many leadership development opportunities that Toastmasters program provides. He supported his club by taking on officer roles and then rose through the ranks of leadership, becoming district director of District 61 in 2019. Our first featured speaker, he's going to talk about from command to leadership, from command to empowerment. Please join me to welcome DTM, past the District 61 District Director, Ronald Servant.
Thank you very much, Lisa. The earliest memory I have of being a leader is, as you heard in the introduction, when I was a Cub Scout leader. I was about 9 years old at the time. And there was this moment where I received an award for being the best leader, but I had no idea I had just received the award because I was too busy scolding the folks in my part of the troop to make sure they were paying attention, not realizing I wasn't paying attention. So it was a bit poetic, really. Since then, I've found myself in a number of positions of leadership, some official, some through influence, and some, frankly, through sheer anxiety that we couldn't pick a location to go for lunch. Somebody has to pick. And it took me some time to realize what would work best as a leader. And what I found is that the people that I led, ensuring the people I led, or rather the people I was responsible for supporting, had everything they needed to succeed. That was the key to leadership that I've ultimately discovered. And I'd like to pass on a few nuggets of what I've learned over the years tonight. One of the books that I've read, as opposed to listen to, in depth, and I make a habit of rereading it year after year because it had such a profound mark on me, was a book by David Marquette called Turn the Ship Around. And if you're not familiar with that book, it is about David Marquette is an ex-submarine captain on nuclear submarines in the U.S. Navy. And he had the task of taking the worst submarine in the fleet and turning it into one of the best. So I'm going to delve in a little bit more to some of what I learned from his books and mix in some of my stories to talk about the difference between traditional leadership and empowerment leadership. Now, traditional leadership is, what we all kind of think of it. There's usually a hierarchy involved. We're very familiar. There's a boss. The boss has a boss. The boss's boss has a boss, et cetera, all the way up to a board of directors, or if you're an elected officials, you have party leaders who kind of try to organize what you're going to do. If you're in a Toastmasters organization, there's, the club president, the VPs. We have folks in area, division, district, region, international directors, presidents. All of it is hierarchy. And it's something that we're familiar with. We understand what it means. Somebody at the top says, this is what we're going to do, and we're all supposed to rally around that and do it, no matter how insane it is. And that's where the problems start to come out, when there's a disconnect between what you're being told to do and what you believe and understand is right. And we call this model, or David calls this model, the leader-follower model. Somebody is in command and control, and you're being told what to do, and you just have to do it. And when he first boarded the Santa Fe in the book, he interrogated or interviewed the crew and asked them how they figure out what they have to do in their jobs. You know, how do they understand their role? And almost everybody in the crew came back with some version, I do what I'm told. And he thought, that just doesn't seem right. They should know what their tasks are, what their responsibilities are, what their duties are. And he came up with the idea of a model called leader leader, where we're helping everybody become a leader in their own right, in their own positions. And it changes how you start to think about, you know, orders, vision, what it is we're trying to accomplish, the goals, etc. So in the leader follower model, you know, the goals are stated, the objectives are dictated to you. You tend to not have input into figuring out what they should be or can be. And what that leads to is if you don't agree with them, or if nobody's spent time, you know, talking to you, explaining why those might be the right goals, you don't connect with them and you're not inspired by them because you don't believe in them. And that drains your motivation, because if you're showing up to a place every day where you have to look to achieve to something that you don't believe in, that doesn't drive your passion, you're going to be sitting there ultimately thinking, why am I even here? I guess I got to earn a paycheck. I'll just, you know, do what I have to do for the day, do what they tell me to do. It's not right. I know it's going to fail, but whatever. And I'll move on. Or you're really good at it and you get promoted and you become part of this. You find a way to cope with that kind of environment, but you're less than inspired. It doesn't bring the best out in you. Um, in the leader model, what you end up doing is looking to build trust with the folks along the hierarchy. One of the concepts that David talks about is move authority to information as opposed to information to authority. And I think this is a really powerful concept. You want to empower the individuals who will take the actions to make something happen with the authority to act, because they have the relevant information to make the right decision. It's not a free for all. You know, you want to give them guidelines and parameters, et cetera. But you know, creating that concept allows folks in those positions to really start to feel ownership over what it is they're doing, because they're making the decisions day to day. Now, to be able to do that, we have to ensure a lot of things are in place, because you can't just walk into a place and say, hey, just start making decisions, because that's probably not going to go very well. First, you need alignment on what it is we're trying to achieve. Now, in the traditional model, you're told what we're trying to achieve. In an empowerment model, you are part of understanding what the shared vision and goals are. Let's take for district leadership, for example. You know, at the beginning of the year, the district director is often tasked with defining the vision. There is the district success plan, and there's a whole section of stuff you have to fill out. And I remember the first 2 or 3 times that I saw that document, I thought, wow, it's such a pointless exercise. And I was completely wrong. That was probably the most important part of our year, because it set the tone. You know, if I wrote it out and handed it to people, you know, I got the, you know, the reaction you would expect of like, I didn't buy into any of these objectives. I didn't have any input into any of them. They just get sent to you and you have to go along. And if you don't agree with them, it's really tough to get behind them. So one of the big things that I've seen be really successful is to bring the leadership group together, you know, at least division directors and above, and then, you know, an expanded version with area directors if you can, you know, get folks together to do it. And you all walk through what it is you're trying to achieve as a group. That doesn't mean you show up with a blank slate. You know, the organization, you know, wants you to hit the DCP goals. It wants you to be SPEDLY distinguished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so now let's talk about how we hit those things, why they're important. Let's have the conversation that pulling in this direction is actually going to be beneficial for all of us. And allowing people that opportunity is so transformative because they really buy in. I challenged my team in my district director year to achieve Smedley Distinguished. And in our district, we hadn't been distinguished for many, many years, and we still haven't. Pandemic kind of put a little curveball into it for us. But in that year, until the pandemic, it was surprising to me how much effort people put into it. The plans were working, and we were well on our way to achieving distinguished status, something we hadn't achieved in many, many years. And if we could count resurrected clubs in September, we did achieve it. But they don't count that, so that doesn't count. Small point of pride on my part. And pride, I should probably pack it away, but I do carry it around a little bit. I'm still working on myself. But that idea of bringing everybody together and having everyone say their piece and understand why it is that we want to do the thing we want to do really helps to unite the team. And it allows you to then go off and say, go and achieve your piece of this. And you have all the information you need to make the right decisions now. And so this is about moving information to authority. You empower them to, support their clubs. You empower the division directors to support their areas, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes such a huge difference. Now, one of the pieces that's really important in this is you've transmitted trust, that you've allowed people to take objectives and make them their own, and you trust that they will achieve them. But trust without some level of verification can turn out poorly, because not all people are ready to really achieve what it is that they've set out to do. And sometimes they need a bit of help. And I think that's the central responsibility of leadership, is understanding how your people are doing and what they need to be successful. And so I call this trust but verify with support. I think we've all heard the saying trust but verify, but I like to add the with support at the end. Because if you just verify, I'm checking in on you. Are you going to meet that objective? Yes, no? Okay, well, that's terrible. I'm going to pull that up. That's a verification thing. It doesn't feel very good, because it feels to me like you don't trust me when you're doing that. So how do we create and maintain that bond of trust? And I think it's the with support part that's really important. You go in and ask questions of how is it going? What do you need? Is there anything I can do to help? And you get an understanding of the current status. You get an understanding of the roadblocks or the things that are keeping them from being successful. And that could be, I don't have enough time to do this. If they trust you enough, they will be honest if they're coming up short and if they need more help. And it could be you can create that safe place where, in the worst case scenario, they're just not up to the task. They will feel safe actually telling you that, so that you can make a change if one needs to be made. But hopefully it's just, oh, we can get an extra volunteer, or you need someone that can do this one thing. Well, I know some people, let's bring them over, etc. And make sure that they're on track. So trust but verify with support, I think, is such an important piece. One of the other lessons I learned as a leader was in my transition in management. I first became a manager when I was working at IBM. And I was promoted from within the team that I was working for to lead that team. So there was literally no job on that team that I couldn't personally do, and that I didn't know in minute detail how to execute. And so when you're made a leader in that scenario, your instincts, or at least mine, were to be very prescriptive. You're approaching it this way. Well, why don't you do it this way? Because I know that works. You're late on doing this. Here, let me help you. I can help finish that. And it took me a while at IBM to pull away from that style of leadership, because I got the feedback, not necessarily directly, but indirectly, that it wasn't necessarily always appreciated. Now, when I transitioned from IBM to my current company, JSI, I joined a company where I hadn't written any of the code. I didn't fundamentally understand every little piece of the product. I had to learn it at a bit of a high level with, deep technical knowledge, but not deep, fine technical knowledge of where every bit and byte was. So I no longer had the ability to go in and do the same job that my people were doing, not without shirking my management duties and focusing on something for weeks at a time that I could no longer afford to do. And it changed the way I thought about things, and it changed my relationship with trust. Because here in this new environment, I had to learn to trust my leaders. I had to learn to trust that they were telling me accurate information. And I had to, when I found that they weren't, because sometimes it happens, to coach them through what I need in order to support them and make the right decisions and report status accurately or detect risk, all of those responsibilities that you have in management. But it was such a powerful moment for me, and it really changed and evolved who I was as a leader. No longer did I need to have full control and understanding of every minute detail. I could take a step back and think of the bigger picture and trust that I had great people in place and learn to recognize when I really trusted someone versus when I could trust someone so far, and apply different levels of trust but verify with support at different frequency points. And so that was very transformational to me. And, David Marquette had a very similar experience. And it's a story I love to tell on his behalf whenever I have the opportunity because I think it's super cool. See, in his book, he was training, or in his life, he was training to command a particular type of nuclear submarine. And at the last moment, never do they do this, they decided to switch him to a different type of nuclear submarine. And the training to be a nuclear submarine captain means that you have to know every detail. You could literally disassemble that boat and put it back together. You understand all aspects of it, how everything is supposed to run. But if you go on to a different type of nuclear submarine, you don't have that knowledge because it is, in fact, very different. The high level principles are the same, but the details of how that sub works, very different. So much so that the first time he took out the Santa Fe for a shakeout tour just in the bay, they were coming back into the harbor and he issued an order. And the crew echoed his order and said, "Yes, sir," and all of that stuff. And nothing happened. And he sat there and he's like, "Did nobody hear me?" Like they were about to hit something. It was a big deal. And he issued the order again and they didn't do anything. They echoed his order, they acknowledged it, but they didn't do anything. And so after they managed to get through that, tense situation, he asked them, "Why didn't you do what I asked?" And one of his crew responded, "Well, we can't do that on this type of nuclear submarine. There's no function that does that." And so he discovered that, he had to trust his people more and he had to earn, that support and that trust from them so that they would, in fact, tell him if he is issuing an order that didn't work. And so he changed his culture on that boat to an I intend model. And I really like this. It's a method where he empowered his crew to not do what they were told, but to learn and do what they were supposed to do. And instead of him commanding or them waiting for a command, they would instead say, "Captain, I intend to submerge the boat." And he would say, "Okay," or some positive response. And if he didn't agree with what they intended to do, he would ask a question and help them decide and understand if that was the right action to take at the time. And this transformed the worst submarine in the fleet to the best. And I think the sign of a great leader is not when they're in the position of leadership, but after they've left. What happens to the team you built after you've left that position? And in David's case, not only did that sub stay or become one of the best in the fleet, it stayed one of the best in the fleet because he'd fundamentally transformed the culture on that submarine. And as everybody got promoted, they continued to thrive in that culture. On average, most submarines score as well as their captains are. And when the captain leaves, the sub scores to the next captain. Very consistent, except in this scenario. That to me is something I hope to be able to achieve, and I'm not sure I have yet. It's something I'm still working to get to. Let me conclude by saying leader follower is an old model that we should leave in the background. We all still in hierarchies, but we don't have to treat ourselves like we are. We can adopt the leader model where we can empower our people to make the decisions after we've achieved alignment. But it's so important to get everybody to buy into what your visions, your goals, your objectives are, so that when they do go out, you know that they have the right information to make the right decision. And finally, trust your people and verify with support. And I think you will see transformational change in your organization and how people are motivated and bought in to accomplishing the work, the vision, the goals, the objective of the organization, the business, or the community. Madam Toastmaster.